The sledgehammer trembled in Arthur's weathered hands. His knuckles turned white from gripping it so tightly, as if letting go would mean surrendering to 40 years of grief all over again. Beside him, Martha couldn't bring herself to look at the broken windows of what had once been their dream home. The windows stared back like hollow, accusing eyes. They hadn't driven 3 hours to restore this place. They hadn't come back to remember the good times or salvage what remained. They had returned with one singular, desperate purpose: to destroy every wall, every beam, every memory this house contained. They wanted to reduce their past to rubble and dust, to finally bury the pain that had haunted them for 4 decades. But when Arthur's first swing connected with the living room wall, something impossible happened. The sound that echoed through the abandoned rooms wasn't the crack of breaking wood or the crumble of old plaster. It was metal, the unmistakable ring of steel reverberating through emptiness, a sound that shouldn't exist in a house built from timber and stone. What they discovered hidden behind those forgotten walls didn't just stop the demolition. It revealed a truth buried for 40 years, proved their son was a hero they never knew about, and led to a reunion they thought was impossible. Sometimes the things we're most desperate to destroy are the very things holding the answers we've spent a lifetime seeking. But before we reveal what Arthur and Martha discovered in the heart of this abandoned house, I want to invite you to join our community. If you love stories about real mysteries, family secrets, and plot twists that restore hope when all seems lost, subscribe to this channel right now and hit that notification bell. That way you'll never miss the incredible journeys of courage and reunion we bring you every single week. Now let's go back to where it all began, on a cold October morning when 2 elderly people decided to face the place that had broken their hearts 40 years ago. Arthur Patterson was 75 years old, his back permanently bent from decades of carrying grief that felt heavier than any physical burden. Martha Patterson was 72, her hands twisted with arthritis, though no physical pain could match what lived in her heart every single day. They stood in front of the old farmhouse on a grey October morning in 2024, the kind of day where the sun never quite manages to break through the clouds. The house loomed before them like a monument to everything they'd lost. A 3-bedroom farmhouse with peeling white paint, a sagging porch, and windows so covered in grime and cracks that you couldn't see inside even if you wanted to. They hadn't been here in 40 years, not since the day their world shattered, not since the day their 19-year-old son, Michael, disappeared without a trace. "We should have done this decades ago," Arthur said, his voice rough from the drive they'd spent in near-total silence. "Should have burned it down the week after we left." Martha didn't respond immediately. She was staring at the second-floor window, Michael's bedroom window, where the curtains she'd sewn by hand still hung in tatters behind broken glass. "I couldn't come back," she finally whispered. "Not until now. Not until I knew I was ready to make it disappear forever." The house had been in Arthur's family for 3 generations. They'd moved here as newlyweds in 1972, full of hope and dreams about raising a family in the country, away from the chaos of city life. For 12 years it had been paradise. Arthur farmed 40 acres of rich Missouri soil. Martha kept the house immaculate and tended a garden that was the envy of Harrison County. And Michael, their miracle child after years of trying to conceive, had filled every room with energy and promise. He'd been brilliant, finishing high school at the top of his class in June 1984. That fall, he'd started his first real job as a clerk in the county administrative office, saving money for college while living at home. He had his whole life ahead of him. Then came November 15th, 1984. Michael had left for work that morning like any other day. 19 years old, wearing the dress shirt and tie he was still getting used to for his office job, he'd kissed his mother goodbye, promised his father he'd help with the evening chores when he got home. That was the last time they saw him. When he didn't come home that evening, they called his office. His supervisor said Michael had left at 5 p.m. as usual. They called his friends. No one had seen him. They drove his normal route home. His car was found abandoned on the side of Route 36, keys still in the ignition, no signs of struggle, no note, nothing. He had simply vanished. The search consumed their lives for the next year. The sheriff's department investigated. Volunteers combed the countryside. Michael's face appeared on missing person posters throughout Missouri and neighboring states. Theories ranged from accident to foul play to voluntary disappearance. Though why would a happy, successful young man with a bright future simply walk away from everything? After 18 months with no leads, no body, no credible sightings, the case went cold. The investigators moved on to other cases. The volunteers stopped searching. The posters faded and were taken down. Arthur and Martha were left alone in a house that had become a shrine to their missing son. They lasted 3 more years before they couldn't take it anymore. Every room screamed Michael's absence. His clothes still hung in his closet. His books lined his shelves. His desk remained as he'd left it that last morning, a coffee mug still sitting there, the coffee long since evaporated to a dark stain. In January 1988, they locked the door and walked away. They moved to a small apartment in Springfield, sold the farm equipment, let the land return to wild grass and weeds. They couldn't sell the house itself. Who would buy a place known throughout the region as the house where that young man vanished? And even if someone would buy it, Martha couldn't bear the thought of strangers living in Michael's home. So it sat. For 40 years it sat, slowly decaying, windows breaking, roof deteriorating, becoming overgrown and forgotten, a monument to unanswered questions and unbearable loss. They'd tried to move on. Arthur worked as a maintenance supervisor at an apartment complex. Martha took a job at a library. They went through the motions of living, celebrated holidays quietly, attended church, paid their bills. But they never healed. How could they? Every birthday Michael didn't celebrate, every Christmas without him, every time they saw a young man who would have been his age, the wound reopened as fresh as the day he disappeared. Now, at 75 and 72, facing their own mortality, they'd made a decision. They were going to erase this place from existence. They were going to take sledgehammers and crowbars to every wall, tear down every board, reduce their past to splinters and dust and haul it away in a rented dumpster. Maybe then they could finally let go. Maybe then they could face their final years without this physical reminder of everything they'd lost. They'd brought tools, 2 sledgehammers, crowbars, work gloves, dust masks, heavy-duty trash bags. The dumpster sat in the overgrown driveway, a massive green container waiting to swallow the remains of their former life. They had 1 week before it would be hauled away, 1 week to destroy 40 years of memories. Arthur picked up his sledgehammer. The weight felt wrong in his hands, too heavy, like the tool itself was resisting what he intended to do with it. "Let's start with the living room," he said. "Work our way through room by room." Martha nodded, but didn't move toward the house. She stood frozen, staring at the front door, remembering the last time she'd walked through it in 1988, crying so hard she could barely breathe, Arthur holding her up because her legs wouldn't support her weight. "Martha," Arthur said gently, "we don't have to do this if you're not ready." "I'm ready," she replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "I've been ready for 40 years. Let's finish this." They walked up the porch steps together. The wood groaned under their weight, some boards so rotted they nearly gave way. The front door wasn't locked. The lock had rusted and broken years ago. Arthur pushed it open, and the hinges shrieked in protest. The smell hit them immediately. Mold, rot, animal droppings, decades of decay. Dust motes floated in the dim light filtering through the grimy windows. Debris covered the floor, plaster that had fallen from the ceiling, leaves and dirt blown in through broken windows, evidence of raccoons and possums that had made this place their home. But underneath the decay, the bones of their life remained. The couch they'd saved 6 months to buy now collapsed and mildewed, the fireplace where they'd hung Christmas stockings every year, the doorframe where they'd marked Michael's height every birthday from age 2 to 18, the pencil marks still faintly visible under decades of grime. Arthur raised the sledgehammer, positioned himself in front of the main wall, took a deep breath, and swung with all the strength his 75-year-old body could muster. The sound that resulted would change everything. Instead of the expected crack and crumble of plaster, giving way to wooden lath, the sledgehammer connected with something that rang like a bell. The metallic clang echoed through the empty house, and the impact vibrated up Arthur's arms so violently he nearly dropped the hammer. "What in God's name?" Arthur muttered, lowering the sledgehammer and examining the wall. The surface plaster had cracked and fallen away in chunks, revealing beneath it not wood or brick, but a dull grey surface that gleamed faintly in the dim light. Metal. There was metal behind their living room wall. "Arthur?" Martha stepped closer, her fear of the house momentarily forgotten in confusion. "Why is there metal in the wall? This house is wood construction. You built it with your father. There was never any metal." "I know," Arthur replied, running his gloved hand over the exposed surface. "I know every inch of this house, every stud, every nail. There was no metal panel here when we left in 1988. Could someone have broken in?" Martha suggested. "Used the house for something after we abandoned it?" "Maybe," Arthur said, though doubt colored his voice. The metal panel looked old, weathered, not recently installed. He swung the sledgehammer again, deliberately this time, targeting the plaster to expose more of whatever lay beneath. Large sections of wall facing fell away, revealing more of the metal surface. It was a panel, roughly 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide, with riveted edges and what looked like a seam running vertically along one side. As Arthur worked to clear more debris, Martha's foot kicked something on the floor. She looked down, and her breath caught in her throat. A wristwatch. Silver metal with a leather band covered in dust but unmistakable. She bent down with difficulty, her arthritic knees protesting, and picked it up with trembling fingers. She turned it over and saw the engraving on the back. Michael Patterson, high school graduation, June 1984. "Arthur," she said, her voice breaking. "Arthur, look." He turned and saw what she was holding, the watch they'd given Michael for his graduation, just 5 months before he disappeared. The watch he'd been wearing the last morning they saw him. Martha clutched it to her chest, tears streaming down her weathered face. He was here. After he disappeared, he came back here. Why? Why would he come back and not come to us? The discovery paralyzed them both. Arthur set down the sledgehammer and wrapped his arms around his wife. They stood in the ruins of their living room, holding each other and a 40-year-old watch, and cried tears they thought they'd exhausted decades ago. When Martha finally composed herself enough to speak, she wiped her eyes and looked at the metal panel. "What is this, Arthur? Why is there metal behind our wall? And why was Michael's watch on the floor?" "I don't know," he replied honestly, "but I'm going to find out." He picked up a crowbar and began working at the edges of the panel, searching for seams or fasteners. The metal was thick, substantial, clearly installed with purpose and permanence. As he worked, memories flooded back unbidden, sharp and painful. Michael at age 4 building elaborate block towers in this very room, his face scrunched in concentration. Michael at age 12, reading on that old couch by the fireplace, already consuming college-level books. Michael at age 17, helping Arthur paint these walls, talking excitedly about his plans for the future, all the things he wanted to accomplish. Michael at age 19 the last morning, sitting at the kitchen table in his work clothes, eating the breakfast Martha had made, laughing at something Arthur said, so alive, so full of promise. Each memory was a knife wound, but also something precious being recovered from the darkness, where they'd tried to bury it. They'd spent 40 years trying not to remember, because remembering hurt too much. But standing here, finding his watch, they realized they'd also been losing Michael piece by piece, letting the details fade, allowing his face to become less clear in their minds. "He was so excited about that job," Martha said quietly, watching Arthur work at the metal panel. "He wanted to save money, go to college, study accounting or business. He had such plans." "I remember," Arthur replied, his voice thick with emotion. "He wanted to make a difference. He talked about working in government, helping people, making things better." As they talked, sharing memories they'd kept locked away for decades, Arthur continued examining the metal panel. Finally, he found what he was looking for. A seam, barely visible, running along the right edge, and next to it, hidden under a layer of grime, a small, recessed handle. "This is a door," he said, realization dawning. "This entire panel is a door." "A door to what?" Martha asked. "There's nothing behind that wall but the old pantry closet. We would have known if there was something else there." "Would we?" Arthur countered. This metal wasn't here when we built the house in 1972. Someone installed it later. But when? And why didn't we know about it? He gripped the recessed handle and pulled. Nothing happened. He tried pushing. Still nothing. Then he noticed a small keyhole beneath the handle, so covered in grime he'd almost missed it. "It's locked," he said. "We need a key. Or we could force it," Martha suggested, surprising herself with the determination in her voice. "If Michael was here, if this has something to do with why he disappeared, I don't care about locks. We're opening it." Arthur nodded and wedged the crowbar into the seam. He applied steady, increasing pressure. The metal groaned. Something inside the mechanism creaked in protest. Then, with a sharp crack, the lock gave way. The door swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing not the pantry closet they expected, but darkness beyond. A dark opening where there should have been solid wall. Martha grabbed one of the flashlights they'd brought. They shined it into the opening and saw a short corridor, perhaps 6 feet long, with concrete walls and a metal stairway descending into deeper darkness. "This is impossible," Martha breathed. "We lived here for 16 years. We walked past this wall every single day. How could this have been here and we never knew?" "Unless it was built before we moved in," Arthur suggested. "My grandfather bought this land in 1920. My father built this house in 1948. What if this was already here? What if it was built into the structure from the very beginning and we just never knew about it?" "But why?" Martha asked. "Why would someone build a hidden room in a farmhouse?" "There's only one way to find out," Arthur said. He tested the first metal stair. It held his weight. "I'm going down." "Not without me," Martha said firmly. "If there are answers down there about Michael, I need to see them with my own eyes." Together they descended into the darkness beneath their house. The metal stairs descended about 12 feet, ending at another door. This one was different. Heavy steel with a wheel handle like something you'd see on a bank vault or a submarine bulkhead. The metal was cold to the touch, and a thin layer of rust covered the wheel. Arthur grabbed the wheel with both hands and turned. It resisted at first, the mechanism stiff from decades without use. He put his full weight into it, and slowly, grudgingly, the wheel began to rotate. Heavy bolts disengaged with mechanical clunks that echoed in the confined space. Finally, the door swung open with a groan of protesting metal. The smell that wafted out was strange, stale air, but not musty or rotten. Dry, preserved, like opening a time capsule that had been sealed away from the world. They stepped through the doorway, and their flashlight beams revealed something that shouldn't exist. They were standing in a room carved out of the earth beneath their house, roughly 15 feet square with an 8-foot ceiling, but it wasn't rough or crude. The walls were lined with painted concrete, smooth and finished. The floor was covered with industrial carpet, faded but intact. A small cot stood against one wall with blankets still neatly arranged, a desk and chair against another wall, metal shelving units lined with supplies, canned goods, bottled water, batteries, first aid kits, and on the wall, hanging from hooks, were clothes. Men's clothes, dress shirts, slacks, a jacket, modern clothes from the 1980s. Martha moved toward them on shaking legs, reaching out to touch a blue dress shirt with trembling fingers. She lifted it off the hook and held it up to the light. It was the exact shirt Michael had worn to work. She remembered ironing it for him that last morning, remembered him putting it on, adjusting the collar in the hallway mirror, practicing looking professional. "These are his clothes," she whispered. "Arthur, these are Michael's clothes. He was here. He was in this room." Arthur swept his flashlight around, taking in more details. The cot had a pillow and a sleeping bag that looked barely used. The desk had papers scattered across it, a few pens in a cup, and most significantly, several composition notebooks stacked neatly to one side. The shelves held not just emergency supplies, but also personal items: a small radio, a deck of cards, a few paperback books, a thermos, an electric lantern still sitting on the desk. This wasn't a storage room. This was a living space. Someone had set this up deliberately, equipped it for extended habitation, made it as comfortable as possible. "Arthur, look at this," Martha said, her flashlight fixed on the concrete wall above the desk. Written directly on the wall in black marker were words that made their hearts stop. "Investigation log, M. Patterson started. October 1984. Below that was a list of names. Mayor Richard Thornton, Councilman David Marsh County, Treasurer James Cole, Sheriff Robert Hendricks, and beside each name were dollar amounts, dates, and the word evidence with check marks. "What is this?" Martha breathed. What was Michael investigating? Arthur moved closer to examine the wall. More writing covered the concrete. Dates, times, notes about meetings, observations about financial discrepancies, references to documents and recordings. "He was investigating corruption," Arthur said slowly, the pieces starting to fit together. "Municipal corruption. Look, he's tracking money, payments, meetings. This isn't just notes, this is an organized investigation." Martha picked up one of the composition notebooks from the desk, with reverent hands, as if it might disintegrate at her touch. She opened it to the first page. In Michael's handwriting, neat and precise, were the words, "If someone finds this, and I'm not here to explain, you need to know the truth. My name is Michael Patterson. I'm 19 years old. I didn't run away. I didn't abandon my family. I'm hiding because I discovered something that powerful people want to keep secret, and I'm trying to expose them before they can silence me permanently. This is my investigation journal. Everything I've learned is documented here. If something happens to me, this evidence needs to reach the FBI. Mom, Dad, if you're reading this, I'm so sorry. I love you both more than I can ever express. I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted to protect you and do what was right." October 15th, 1984. Martha's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the notebook. Tears streamed down her face, dropping onto the page, smudging the 40-year-old ink. "He was here," she sobbed. "Our baby was here, hiding beneath our house, and we never knew. We were up there going crazy looking for him, calling police, thinking he was dead or kidnapped, and he was right here beneath our feet." Arthur felt rage and anguish warring in his chest. Why? Why didn't he come to us? Why didn't he tell us what was happening? "Keep reading," Martha said, her voice barely controlled. "We need to know what happened." She turned to the next page and began reading aloud, her voice breaking frequently, but pushing through. October 16th, 1984. "I've been working at the county administration office for 4 months now. It's mostly boring. Filing paperwork, processing permits, data entry. But last week, I noticed something strange. I was filing budget reports when I saw a payment voucher for $50,000 to a construction company called Riverside Development. The weird part was that I'd filed an identical voucher for the same amount to the same company just 2 months earlier. Same project code, same description, road improvement materials. I mentioned it to my supervisor, thinking it was a duplicate filing error. He got really nervous and told me to forget about it, that it had already been processed and approved at higher levels. But I couldn't forget about it, so I started looking more carefully at the files that crossed my desk, and I found more duplicates. Lots of them. Thousands of dollars in repeated payments to companies I'd never heard of. I made copies of everything. I didn't know what else to do. Martha paused, wiping her eyes. He found financial fraud. That's what he discovered. Arthur's jaw was clenched tight. "Keep reading. I need to know what happened to him." Martha turned to the next entry. October 25th, 1984. "I made a huge mistake. I showed the copies to Mr. Reeves, our neighbor. He's always been like an uncle to me, and he used to work for the FBI before he retired. I thought he could tell me what to do. He looked at the documents and his face went white. He said, 'Michael, where did you get these?' I told him about my job, about noticing the duplicates. He said I'd stumbled onto something very dangerous. He said the names on these documents were some of the most powerful people in the county, the mayor, councilman, the sheriff. He said if they knew I had copies of these payments, they would do anything to protect themselves. I asked what I should do. He said the first priority was keeping me safe. He said we needed to hide the evidence and hide me until he could figure out how to get this to federal investigators safely. That's when he told me about this place." Martha looked up from the notebook. "Andrew Reeves, he was our neighbor for years. He died in 1986. Heart attack, they said. He knew," Arthur said. "He knew Michael was down here. He was helping him," Martha replied. "Protecting him." She continued reading. October 28th, 1984. Mr. Reeves showed me this bunker 3 days ago. He said his father built it during the Cold War as a bomb shelter, back when people were afraid of nuclear war. It was designed to be completely hidden, with an entrance concealed behind a false wall. His father told him about it before he died, but Mr. Reeves never told anyone else. He said it was a family secret. He said it was the perfect place to hide until he could figure out a plan. He brought down supplies, set up this cot, brought my clothes, everything I'd need. But tonight he came with terrible news. He said someone at my office reported that I'd been asking questions about the budget files. He said Sheriff Hendricks came to my supervisor asking about me. He said people were starting to watch our house. Mr. Reeves said I couldn't go home. He said if I showed up now, they'd know I had the documents, and they'd do whatever it took to get them back and keep me quiet. He said I needed to disappear, really disappear. He said he would help stage it, so people would think I ran away or had an accident. He said it was the only way to keep me safe and keep my family safe. I asked about Mom and Dad. He said the hardest part was that they couldn't know. He said if they knew I was hiding, the people we're investigating would notice that they weren't acting like parents whose son had vanished. They might get suspicious. They might hurt Mom and Dad to get to me. So I have to let them think I'm gone. I have to let them suffer, thinking they lost me, so they'll actually be safe. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. But Mr. Reeves is right. This is the only way. Tomorrow he's going to move my car to Route 36 and leave it there. He's going to call in a tip that someone saw me walking along the highway. He's going to make it look like I left voluntarily, and I'm going to stay down here in the darkness, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to strike. I'm so sorry, Mom and Dad. I'm so sorry. Martha couldn't continue. She closed the notebook and sobbed, her entire body shaking. Arthur held her, his own tears falling silently. He sacrificed everything to protect us, Martha finally managed to say. He was 19 years old, and he chose to disappear, to let us think he was dead or gone, because he was trying to keep us safe. And trying to expose corruption, Arthur added. Our son was braver than we ever knew. They sat together on the cot where Michael had slept, in the underground room where he'd hidden, and tried to process the magnitude of what they'd discovered. Finally, Arthur spoke. There are more notebooks. We need to read them all. We need to know what happened to him. I'm afraid, Martha admitted. What if the answer is that he's dead? What if we find out he died down here alone because of all this? Then at least we'll know the truth, Arthur said. We've spent 40 years with questions. Whatever the answer is, we deserve to know it. Martha nodded and picked up the second notebook. The second notebook continued Michael's investigation journal. Over the next hour, Arthur and Martha read through entry after entry, watching their son's investigation unfold across the pages. November 3rd, 1984. Mr. Reeves brought me a small cassette recorder. He said if I'm going to build a case, I need more than just documents. I need testimony, recordings, proof of intent. He's been incredible. Every 2 or 3 days, he comes late at night with food, supplies, updates on what's happening above. He says the search for me is massive. Hundreds of volunteers, police from 3 counties, even the FBI got involved. It kills me to know Mom and Dad are suffering, but Mr. Reeves keeps reminding me, if I surface now, before we have enough evidence to make arrests, the corrupt officials will make me disappear for real, and they might hurt my parents too to tie up loose ends. So I stay here, and I investigate. Mr. Reeves has been amazing at getting me information. He has contacts from his FBI days. He's been able to request documents under Freedom of Information laws without raising suspicion. Every few days, he brings me new budget reports, meeting minutes, contractor records. The pattern is becoming clear. Over the past 5 years, Mayor Thornton, Councilman Marsh, Treasurer Cole, and Sheriff Hendricks have been stealing from the county. They approve fake construction projects, create shell companies, process payments for work that was never done. The money gets laundered through multiple accounts and ends up in their pockets. I've documented at least $2 million in theft so far, and I think there's more. Martha had to pause reading, overwhelmed. $2 million. They were stealing millions, and Michael found it. He was 19, Arthur said, pride and grief mixing in his voice, barely out of high school, and he uncovered a massive corruption scheme. The entries continued through November and into December. December 10th, 1984, Mr. Reeves is worried. He says Sheriff Hendricks has been asking him questions about me. Apparently, the sheriff found out that Mr. Reeves and I were close, that I used to help him with yard work, and he'd tell me stories about his FBI career. The sheriff asked if I'd ever mentioned anything unusual about work, if I'd seemed worried or scared before I disappeared. Mr. Reeves said he played dumb, said I never talked about work much, that my disappearance was as much a mystery to him as to anyone. But he's concerned they're circling closer. He said we might need to move me somewhere else soon. He has a cabin in the Ozarks that's completely off-grid. He's thinking about taking me there until we have enough evidence to go to federal prosecutors. The problem is getting me there without being seen. I can't just walk out and get in his truck. People know his vehicle. If someone saw him with a young man matching my description, the whole thing falls apart. He's working on a plan. Meanwhile, I keep documenting. I now have records of irregular payments totaling $2.7 million. I have photographs of documents. I have dates and times of suspicious meetings. Soon, we'll have enough. Soon, I can bring these criminals to justice and go home. I dream about that every night. Walking through the door, seeing Mum's face, telling them I'm okay. I imagine it so clearly I can almost feel it. Hold on, Mum and Dad. I'm coming home soon. I promise. Martha had to stop reading again. The pain in her chest was physical, knowing how close Michael had been, how much he'd longed to return to them. Keep going, Arthur urged gently. We need to know what happened. December 18th, 1984. Something's wrong. Mr. Reeves hasn't come in 4 days. He's never gone more than 3 days without visiting. I'm starting to run low on food. I'm trying not to panic. Maybe he's sick. Maybe he's being watched and can't risk coming. Maybe he's working on the plan to move me. But I'm scared. What if something happened to him? What if they figured out he was helping me? What if he's in danger because of me? I have enough food for maybe another week if I'm careful. After that, I don't know what I'll do. December 23rd, 1984. 6 days now. No sign of Mr. Reeves. I've been rationing food and water. I've been reading the same 3 paperback books over and over to stay sane. Last night, I heard something above. Heavy footsteps on the floor above the bunker. Not the familiar pattern of Mom and Dad's footsteps that I used to hear before they moved out. Someone else. I stayed completely silent. Barely breathed. The footsteps moved around for maybe 10 minutes, then left. Someone was in the house. Looking for something? Looking for this bunker? I don't know. I'm terrified. December 28th, 1984. I can't wait anymore. I have 2 cans of food left. No fresh water. I've been drinking from the emergency water containers, which taste terrible but kept me alive. I need to find out what happened to Mr. Reeves. I need to know if it's safe to surface. Tomorrow morning I'm going to risk going up. I'll be careful. Watch through the windows first. Make sure no one's around. If it's clear, I'll try to get to Mr. Reeves's house. If I don't make it, if something happens to me, I want to make sure all this evidence survives. I'm going to hide copies of everything in multiple places. 1 set stays here in the bunker. Another set I'll try to get to Mr. Reeves' house. If I can get to a phone, I'll call the FBI office in Kansas City directly. This might be the last entry I write. If it is, I want Mom and Dad to know I love you both more than words can say. Every decision I made was to protect you and to do what was right. I hope you can forgive me for the pain I caused. I hope we see each other again soon, either in this life or the next. I'm not giving up. I'm going to expose these criminals and come home. Michael Patterson, December 28, 1984. That was the last entry in the second notebook. Martha and Arthur sat in stunned silence. Their son had been alive in this bunker through the massive search, through Thanksgiving, through Christmas of 1984. While they'd been mourning him, while they'd spent Christmas unable to even look at decorations or celebrate, he'd been right beneath their feet, scared and alone and running out of food. What happened to him? Martha whispered. After December 28th, what happened? Arthur was already searching the bunker more carefully. There had to be more information. Michael had said he was going to hide evidence in multiple places. That's when Martha noticed something. On the far wall, Partially hidden behind the shelving unit was what looked like another door, a smaller door, lower to the ground, painted the same color as the wall so it blended in. "Arthur, look." They moved the shelving unit aside and there it was, a small metal hatch about 3 feet square set into the wall. Arthur pulled it open. Beyond was another passage, this one narrower, more like a tunnel than a hallway. It extended beyond the reach of their flashlight beam. An escape route, Arthur realized. This bunker wasn't just designed to hide, it was designed with a way out. On the wall next to the tunnel entrance, written in the same black marker Michael had used for his investigation notes, were 4 words. "Going to Reeves' house, M." "He used the tunnel," Martha said. "On December 28th, 1984, he went through this tunnel. Maybe it led to somewhere he could get out safely, somewhere he could reach Andrew Reeves's house." "But did he make it?" Arthur asked the question they were both thinking. "There's only one way to find out," Martha replied, looking into the dark tunnel. "We follow it. We see where it goes." Arthur checked his flashlight batteries and nodded. "Let's go. Let's follow our son's path." They had to crouch to fit through the tunnel. The passage was narrow, reinforced with wooden beams, heading in what Arthur estimated was a northeast direction. They walked hunched over for what felt like several hundred feet. Finally, the tunnel began to slope upward. They reached another metal hatch, this one with a simple bolt lock on the inside. Arthur slid the bolt and pushed. The hatch opened upward, showering them with dirt and leaves. Cold air and daylight flooded in. They emerged into dense woods, the hatch cleverly disguised as natural ground, covered with years of accumulated forest debris. They were about 300 yards from their house, in a thicket so overgrown they never would have found this entrance unless they knew exactly where to look. Arthur oriented himself. "We're on the edge of what used to be the Reeves property. Their house was about a quarter mile in that direction." "The tunnel led him straight towards safety," Martha said. "Andrew Reeves built an escape route directly to his own property. Michael could have used it to reach Andrew's house without being seen on roads or open ground." "But did he make it?" Arthur repeated. "And if he did, why didn't he ever come home?" They stood in the forest, 40 years after their son had walked this same path, desperately seeking answers that had been buried for 4 decades. Then Martha's phone rang, startling them both. Cell service was spotty out here, but apparently they had just enough signal. She pulled out her phone and looked at the screen. Unknown number. "Hello?" she answered. A man's voice, official and professional, spoke. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Special Agent David Chen with the FBI. I'm calling about your son, Michael Patterson. We need to talk immediately." Martha's hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. "What? How do you—" "We just found—" "Mrs. Patterson, I know this is shocking," the FBI agent said, his voice calm but urgent. "But I need you to listen carefully. We've been monitoring your property. When you opened that bunker earlier today, it triggered an alert system that's been in place since 1985. "An alert system?" Arthur leaned close so he could hear. "What are you talking about?" "Who am I speaking with?" Agent Chen asked. "Arthur Patterson, Michael's father. Put it on speaker, Martha." She fumbled with the phone and activated the speaker. "Okay, we can both hear you now. Please, tell us what's happening." "What do you know about our son?" "I'm in a vehicle heading to your location right now," Agent Chen said. "I'll be there in approximately 15 minutes, but I need to give you some information immediately because you're potentially in danger." "Danger?" Martha's voice rose in panic. "From who?" "The men your son was investigating in 1984 are mostly dead now," Agent Chen explained quickly. "But there are surviving family members and associates who've spent 40 years believing that evidence was lost forever. If they find out you've accessed the bunker, they might act to destroy what's there." "The evidence," Arthur said. "Michael's investigation, it's all still there." "I know," Agent Chen replied. "What you don't know is that your son's investigation was successful. In February 1985, acting on evidence Michael provided, the FBI arrested Mayor Thornton, Councilman Marsh, Treasurer Cole, and Sheriff Hendricks. All 4 were convicted of embezzlement, fraud, and corruption. They went to federal prison. Martha's legs nearly gave out. Arthur caught her, and they leaned against a tree trying to process this information. "Michael's investigation worked?" Martha breathed. He did it? He did it, Agent Chen confirmed. But here's what you need to understand, and why I need to see you immediately. Michael didn't die, he's alive. The world seemed to tilt. Martha made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Arthur's vision blurred with tears. He's alive? Arthur managed to say. Where is he? Why hasn't he contacted us? It's been 40 years. It's complicated, Agent Chen said, and I can't explain everything over the phone. But the short version is, Michael entered the Federal Witness Protection Program in January 1985. He's been living under a new identity ever since. Witness protection? Martha's mind was reeling. But why? If the criminals were arrested, why did he need to stay hidden? Because there were others involved that we couldn't prove at the time, Agent Chen explained. Associates, money launderers, people who would have killed Michael to prevent him from testifying at trial. The threat was real. Michael agreed to witness protection to stay safe and to ensure his testimony could be used to convict everyone involved. For 40 years, Arthur's voice was a mixture of joy that his son was alive and anger that they'd been kept in the dark. He's been in witness protection for 40 years, and you never told us? Michael requested it, Agent Chen said, and his voice softened with sympathy. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, your son made the hardest decision of his life. He believed that if you knew he was alive, if you showed any change in behavior, people watching you might figure out he was in protection. He was trying to keep you safe. We thought he was dead, Martha sobbed. For 40 years, we thought we'd lost our baby, and he was alive the whole time? I know, Agent Chen said gently. I know how devastating this is, but I'm calling now because something has changed. The last of the criminals from the 1984 case died 6 months ago. The threat is over. Michael has been cleared to exit witness protection if he chooses. If he chooses? Arthur's voice was sharp. What does that mean? It means Michael is now 59 years old, Agent Chen said. He's built a life under his new identity. He has a career, maybe a family. Leaving witness protection means leaving that life behind. It's his choice whether to make contact with you or not. And has he? Martha asked, almost afraid of the answer. Has he chosen? There was a pause. Then Agent Chen said, He's in my car. We're 5 minutes from your location. He wants to see you. The phone nearly slipped from Martha's grasp. She looked at Arthur, who was crying openly now, his weathered face streaming with tears. Our boy, Arthur whispered. Our boy is coming home. Stay where you are, Agent Chen instructed. We're almost there. The next 5 minutes felt like 5 hours. Arthur and Martha stood at the edge of the woods, holding each other, crying, laughing, unable to believe what was happening. Then they heard a car engine. Through the trees, they could see a dark sedan pulling into their overgrown driveway, parking next to the dumpster they'd rented to haul away the demolished house, the house they'd come to destroy, the house that had led them to the truth. 2 men got out of the car. One was clearly the FBI agent, mid-40s, dark suit, professional demeanor. The other man was older, late 50s, wearing jeans and a casual jacket. He had graying hair and a face that time had changed, but Martha would have known him anywhere. Her son, her Michael, alive and walking toward her after 40 years. They ran. Arthritis, bad backs, 70-plus years of age. None of it mattered. Arthur and Martha ran across the overgrown yard toward their son, who was also running toward them. They collided in an embrace that 40 years of separation couldn't diminish. All 3 of them were crying, holding each other so tightly it hurt, saying each other's names over and over. Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry, Michael sobbed. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted you to think I was gone. You're alive, Martha kept repeating, touching his face, his hair, his shoulders, as if she couldn't quite believe he was real. You're alive. You're really alive. I'm here, Michael said. I'm here and I'm never leaving again. Arthur pulled back just enough to look at his son's face. 40 years had changed the boy into a man, but the eyes were the same. Michael's eyes, looking at him with love and regret and hope. You did it, Arthur said. Your investigation. Agent Chen said you did it. You brought those criminals to justice. I tried, Michael replied. I tried to do the right thing, but it cost us so much. It cost you so much. You were 19 years old, Martha said, cupping his face in her weathered hands. You were just a boy and you were so brave. You sacrificed everything to do what was right and to protect us. I wanted to come back, Michael said, his voice breaking. Every day for 40 years I wanted to come back, but they said it wasn't safe. They said if I made contact, the people still free might figure it out and hurt you to get to me. So I stayed away. I built a different life. But I never stopped thinking about you. Never stopped missing you. Agent Chen approached respectfully. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we should move this reunion inside. And Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, we need to secure that bunker. The evidence there is still legally significant, and we need to make sure nothing happens to it. They moved toward the house, Michael between his parents, all three of them still holding each other, unwilling to let go. As they walked, Michael looked at the house and the dumpster. What were you doing here? He asked. Agent Chen said you came to demolish the house? We couldn't live with the memories anymore, Martha explained. We thought you were gone forever. We wanted to destroy the place that reminded us of losing you. Michael stopped walking and looked at his parents with anguish. I did this to you. I put you through 40 years of grief. No, Arthur said firmly. You did what you had to do. You were brave and good, and you tried to protect everyone, including us. You don't apologize for that. And if you hadn't hidden that evidence in the bunker, Martha added, we never would have found it. We would have demolished the house and never known the truth, never known you were alive. Maybe this was meant to happen exactly this way. They entered the house through the front door, walking past the exposed metal panel, descending the stairs into the bunker where Michael had spent weeks in hiding 40 years ago. Michael looked around at the space he'd lived in during the worst months of his life. It looks exactly the same. I can't believe it's still here. Tell us everything, Martha said. Tell us what happened after you left here. Tell us about your life. We've missed 40 years. We want to know everything. And there in the underground room where a 19-year-old boy had chosen sacrifice over safety, where he'd documented corruption and hidden from danger, Michael Patterson sat down with his parents and told them the story they'd waited 40 years to hear. Michael sat on the same cot where he'd slept in 1984, his parents on either side of him, still holding his hands as if he might disappear again if they let go. After I left this bunker on December 28, 1984, Michael began, his voice steady but emotional, I used the tunnel and made it to Mr. Reeves's house, but when I got there, I found him collapsed on his kitchen floor. He'd had a massive heart attack. He was still alive, barely. Martha gasped. Andrew, we heard he died of a heart attack. December 27th, 1984. We didn't even go to the funeral. We were too devastated about you. He was trying to help me when it happened, Michael said, grief evident in his voice even after 40 years. I called 911 immediately. They came and took him to the hospital, but he died 2 hours later. Before the ambulance arrived, he regained consciousness for just a few minutes. He grabbed my hand and made me promise something. What? Arthur asked. He made me promise that no matter what happened, I would finish what we started, Michael replied. He said he'd already made contingency plans in case something happened to him. He said there was a letter in his desk, sealed with instructions. He made me swear I would follow those instructions and bring the corrupt officials to justice. So, what did you do? Martha asked. I stayed hidden in his house until the paramedics left. Then I found the letter. It contained detailed instructions and contact information for his former partner at the FBI, a man named Robert Morrison, who was now a senior agent in the Kansas City field office. Mr. Reeves had already contacted Morrison weeks earlier, told him about the case, told him a witness would be coming forward with evidence. Michael took a breath, remembering. That night, I used Mr. Reeves's phone to call Morrison. I told him everything. He arranged for a team to pick me up. They came in the middle of the night, took me to Kansas City, and that's when my new life began. But why didn't you come to us first? Martha's voice held no accusation, only the need to understand. Even just to tell us you were safe. Morrison explained the reality of the situation, Michael said. The men I'd been investigating were powerful and dangerous. Sheriff Hendricks was the law in our county. Mayor Thornton controlled everything. They had connections, resources, people who would do anything to protect them. He paused, looking at his mother's face. Morrison said if I surfaced, If I went back to you, they would assume I had evidence. They would come after me. They might come after you to get to me. He said the only way to keep everyone safe was for me to stay missing until the FBI could build their case and make arrests. But that took months, Arthur said. 3 months, Michael confirmed. 3 months where I was in protective custody, where FBI agents were using my evidence to investigate, where they were building cases against all 4 men. During that time, you and Mom moved away from the house. I wanted so badly to reach out, to tell you I was okay, but Morrison convinced me that any contact could compromise the investigation and put you in danger. And then the arrests happened, Agent Chen interjected, speaking from where he stood near the bunker entrance. February 15, 1985. All 4 men were arrested simultaneously. Federal charges: embezzlement, fraud, corruption, money laundering. The evidence Michael provided was airtight. So why didn't you come back then? Martha asked, tears streaming down her face. The criminals were arrested. You could have come home. Michael's expression darkened. Because we discovered there were others. The 4 men we arrested were the core of the operation, but they had associates. People who'd helped launder money. People who'd taken payoffs to look the other way. People who'd profited from the corruption. And some of those people were never caught, Agent Chen added. They went underground. And they sent a message through intermediary channels that if Michael testified at trial, if he showed his face in public, they would kill him. And they would kill his family to make sure no one ever testified against them again. Arthur's hand tightened on Michael's. So you disappeared completely. The FBI offered me witness protection, Michael said. A new identity, a new life, complete separation from everything I'd known. Morrison said it was the only way to guarantee my safety and yours. And you took it, Martha said softly. I took it, Michael confirmed. I became someone else. New name, new background, new city. They helped me finish college under my new identity. I built a career. I made a life. Did you have a family? Martha asked tentatively. Were you happy? Michael smiled sadly. I got married in 1992. Her name is Jennifer. We have 2 children, a daughter, Sarah, who's 29, and a son, David, who's 26. I've been happy, yes, but there's always been a hole in my life. There's always been the family I left behind, the parents I could never see or contact, the life I couldn't return to. We have grandchildren, Martha breathed. We've had grandchildren for decades and never knew. I'm so sorry, Michael said again. If I could go back and change how it happened. Don't, Arthur interrupted. Don't apologize for doing what you had to do. You were protecting us and trying to do what was right. That took more courage than most people have in a lifetime. Agent Chen stepped forward. If I may explain what changed, 6 months ago, the last person credibly connected to the 1984 corruption case died. David Marsh's son, who we believed was involved in the money laundering but never had enough evidence to charge, died of cancer. With his death, the Bureau reassessed Michael's case and determined the threat level was now minimal. Minimal enough that I could leave witness protection if I wanted to, Michael said. They gave me the choice. Stay in my current life with my current identity, or step out of protection and reconnect with my past. And you chose us, Martha said, fresh tears falling. I chose both, Michael corrected. My wife and children know the truth. I told them everything last month when the Bureau gave me the option. They supported my decision to reach out to you. Jennifer wants to meet you. Sarah and David want to meet their grandparents. But how did you know to come today? Arthur asked. How did you know we were here? The bunker, Agent Chen explained. When Michael entered witness protection, he told us about the bunker and the evidence stored there. We installed a silent alarm system on the main entrance. If anyone ever opened that metal door, it would alert us. The system has been active for 40 years, just waiting. When you opened it this morning, Michael added, the Bureau contacted me. I've been in Kansas City since the threat assessment changed, waiting for the chance to reach out to you but trying to figure out how. When they called and said you'd found the bunker, I knew it was time. Agent Chen picked me up and we drove straight here. Perfect timing, Martha said. We came here to destroy this house, to tear it down and try to bury our pain. If we'd come even a week ago, if we'd started demolition earlier, we might have destroyed the bunker before we knew what was in it. Maybe it was meant to happen this way, Michael said. Maybe we needed 40 years to pass. Maybe we needed the threat to be over. Maybe we needed this exact moment for everything to come together. They sat in silence for a moment, holding each other, processing the magnitude of what had happened. Then they heard footsteps above, heavy boots on the floor of the house. Multiple people. Agent Chen immediately drew his weapon and moved to the stairs. "Stay here," he commanded, but the voice that called down was familiar. Official. FBI. "Agent Chen, it's Morrison. We got your call. Brought a team to secure the evidence." Agent Chen relaxed and holstered his weapon. "Come down, sir." An older man, probably in his 70s, descended the metal stairs. Behind him came 3 younger agents with equipment cases. Morrison looked around the bunker with something like reverence. "After 40 years, I finally get to see it. The bunker that started everything." His eyes found Michael, and Michael Patterson, the bravest 19-year-old I ever met. Michael stood and shook Morrison's hand. "Thank you, sir, for everything you did to protect me and my family." Morrison turned to Arthur and Martha. "Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, I owe you an apology. I'm the one who insisted Michael couldn't contact you. I made the call that your son had to stay hidden and let you believe he was gone. That decision has haunted me for 40 years. You kept him alive," Arthur said simply. "You kept our son alive. We can never repay that." "What happens now?" Martha asked. "With all of this," Morrison gestured to the bunker, "this space contains evidence from one of the most successful corruption cases in Missouri history. The notebooks, recordings, documents, all of it has historical significance. With your permission, we'd like to preserve it, turn it into a record of what your son accomplished. And use it," Agent Chen added, "to train new agents. Michael's case is taught at the FBI Academy as an example of civilian courage and effective evidence gathering. Agents learn from what he did here." "Really?" Michael looked surprised. "Your case changed how we approach witness protection and civilian informants," Morrison explained. "You were 19, with no training, no law enforcement background, yet you conducted an investigation that would have been impressive for a seasoned agent. We study what you did and how you did it." Michael looked around the bunker, at the notebooks on the desk, at the investigation notes still visible on the walls. "I was just trying to do the right thing. That's what makes it remarkable," Morrison replied. "You didn't do it for glory or reward. You did it because you saw something wrong and decided someone had to fix it. Even knowing it might cost you everything." "It did cost me everything," Michael said quietly. "It cost me 40 years with my parents. But it also saved how many people?" Arthur countered. "How many county employees kept their jobs because the corruption was exposed? How many projects got proper funding instead of being stolen from? How many other young people like you learned they could stand up to corruption and win?" "Your father's right," Morrison said. "The 4 men you helped convict had been stealing for 8 years before you stopped them. If they'd continued even 5 more years, the county would have been bankrupted. Schools, roads, public services, all of it would have collapsed. You saved your community, Michael, even if they never knew it." Over the next several hours, FBI technicians carefully documented and photographed everything in the bunker. Michael walked his parents through his investigation, explaining each piece of evidence, each entry in the notebooks, each decision he'd made. "This is where I recorded the conversation between Mayor Thornton and Councilman Marsh," he said, pointing to a small cassette recorder on the shelf. "I hid a microphone in the mayor's office when I was filing papers one day. They thought they were completely alone, and they discussed exactly how much they'd stolen and where they'd hidden it. And this," he held up one of the notebooks, "is where I mapped out all their shell companies. They had 15 fake businesses. I documented everyone, showed how money flowed through them, proved they were all connected to the same 4 men. Martha listened with pride and grief intertwined. Her son, barely an adult, had done this, had risked everything for justice. "What was the hardest part?" she asked. "Of all of it, what was the hardest?" Michael didn't hesitate. "Hearing you crying. When I was down here, I could sometimes hear through the vents. I could hear you and Dad upstairs before you moved out. I heard you crying, heard you calling my name. That almost broke me. I almost went up a dozen times, almost revealed myself just to stop your pain." "What stopped you?" Arthur asked. "Mr. Reeves," Michael replied. "He kept reminding me that if I surfaced before we had enough evidence, before we could protect you, they would kill all three of us. He said the crying would stop eventually, but death was permanent. He made me promise to be strong." "And you were," Martha said. "Stronger than we ever imagined." As they talked, Morrison approached with a document folder. "Michael, there's something else. When we arrested the four men in 1985, we seized their assets. Houses, cars, bank accounts, everything purchased with stolen money. After the trial, all of it was liquidated." "I remember," Michael said. "What you might not know is that the Victims' Compensation Fund that was established from those assets was never fully distributed. There was approximately $400,000 that remained after all county debts were repaid and legitimate victims were compensated. That money has been sitting in an escrow account for 39 years, earning interest." "Okay," Michael said, not understanding the relevance. "The fund was established with a provision. If the primary witness in the case ever came forward and their identity was confirmed, they would be entitled to compensation for their sacrifice and cooperation. Michael, you're entitled to that money. With 40 years of interest, it's now worth approximately $1.2 million. Michael stared at him. "What?" "It's yours," Morrison said. "Money seized from criminals, held in trust for the person who made their conviction possible. It's completely legal, already approved by federal courts decades ago. We just need your signature to transfer it." Michael looked at his parents, then back at Morrison. "I don't want money for what I did." "It's not a reward," Morrison explained. "It's compensation. You lost 40 years with your family. You lost your identity, your hometown, your entire life. This is the government acknowledging that sacrifice had real costs." "Then I don't want it for me," Michael said. "I want it to go to my parents. They're the ones who suffered. They're the ones who lost 40 years with their son." "No," Arthur said firmly. "You use that money for your family, for Jennifer, Sarah, and David. They've had a father who couldn't tell them about his past, couldn't show them where he came from. Use it to give them the security they deserve." "We don't need money," Martha added. "We have our son back. That's worth more than any amount of money could ever be." Agent Chen, who'd been listening, spoke up. "What if we split it? Part to Michael and his family, part to Arthur and Martha. Everyone sacrificed. Everyone deserves compensation." Michael looked at his parents. "Is that acceptable?" "If it means we can help our grandchildren we haven't met yet," Martha said, "then yes, we split it." Morrison made a note in his file. "I'll arrange the paperwork. Now, about this bunker and the house above it. We were going to demolish it," Arthur reminded him. "I'd like to propose an alternative," Morrison said. "This site has historical significance. What if instead of destroying it, we worked with the Missouri Historical Society to preserve it, turn it into a museum or educational site about civic courage and standing up to corruption?" "A museum?" Martha looked around the underground room. "Here? Think about it," Morrison urged. "School groups could visit. They could see where a 19-year-old worked to expose corruption. They could learn that one person, even someone young with no power, can make a difference. This could inspire the next generation." Michael's eyes lit up. "I love that idea. Instead of this place being a monument to pain, it becomes a monument to hope, to the idea that doing the right thing matters." "But it's your house," Morrison said to Arthur and Martha. "It's your decision." Arthur and Martha looked at each other, communicating in the silent way couples do after 50 years of marriage. "What do you think?" Arthur asked his wife. "I think," Martha said slowly, "that we came here to destroy our past, but maybe we should preserve it instead, not for us but for everyone else who needs to believe that courage can triumph over corruption." "Then we preserve it," Arthur decided. "We work with the Historical Society. We turn this place into something meaningful. There's one condition," Martha added. "We want Michael's name on it. No more hiding. No more witness protection identity. People should know that Michael Patterson at 19 years old did this. He should get credit for his courage." Michael looked uncertain. "I don't need credit. I didn't do it for recognition." "But other people need to see it," Martha insisted. Other 19-year-olds who discover something wrong and wonder if they should speak up. They need to know someone did it before them and survived. Your story can save lives and prevent corruption. Let us tell it. Michael looked to Morrison, who nodded. The threat is over. There's no reason you need to stay hidden anymore. If you want to come public with your story, the Bureau will support you. Then I agree, Michael said. Let's tell the truth, all of it. 1 year after Arthur and Martha had returned to destroy their old house, they stood in front of it again. But everything was different. The house had been fully restored, not renovated into something modern, but carefully returned to how it looked in 1984. White paint, black shutters, a new porch with comfortable rocking chairs. The windows were whole, clean, letting sunlight into rooms that had been dark for 40 years. But it wasn't their home anymore, it was something better. A bronze plaque beside the front door read, "The Michael Patterson Civic Courage Center," in honor of Michael Patterson, who at age 19 in 1984 risked everything to expose corruption and uphold justice. Doing the right thing is never easy, but it's always worth it. The house was now a museum and educational center, operated jointly by the Missouri Historical Society and the FBI. The main floor had been converted into exhibition space, telling the story of the 1984 corruption case. Visitors could see copies of the evidence Michael had gathered, read his investigation notebooks, understand how one person's courage had brought down a criminal conspiracy. But the bunker beneath remained exactly as it had been. Visitors could descend the metal stairs, see the room where Michael had hidden and worked, read his journal entries on the walls, understand the sacrifice he'd made. The center hosted school groups regularly. FBI agents gave talks about civic courage and the importance of standing up to corruption. College criminal justice programs brought students to study the case. And today was special. Today was the official grand opening, with state officials, FBI leadership, and media from across Missouri gathering to commemorate the center. Arthur and Martha stood with Michael and his family as the ceremony began. Meeting Jennifer, Sarah, and David had been overwhelming and wonderful. Their grandchildren were thoughtful, kind people who'd grown up knowing their father had a secret past, but not understanding its full scope until this year. "Grandma," Sarah had said the first time they met, "my whole life, Dad would sometimes get this far-away look in his eyes. Mom would tell us he was thinking about people he missed. We never understood. Now we do. He was thinking about you." The ceremony featured speeches from the governor, from Morrison, now retired but present for this occasion, from Agent Chen, and from several community leaders whose careers had been inspired by Michael's story. Then it was Michael's turn to speak. He stood at a podium looking out at hundreds of people and told his story publicly for the first time. "When I was 19 years old," he began, "I had to make the hardest decision of my life. I discovered something wrong and had to choose, stay silent and safe or speak up and risk everything." He paused, looking at his parents. "I chose to speak up, but I want to be clear about something. I'm not a hero. I was a scared kid who stumbled into something bigger than he understood. The real heroes are the people who helped me. Andrew Reeves, our neighbor, who sacrificed his life trying to protect me. FBI agent Robert Morrison, who believed a 19-year-old story and built a case that brought criminals to justice. My parents, Arthur and Martha Patterson, who suffered for 40 years because I couldn't tell them I was alive." His voice broke slightly. "And my wife Jennifer and my children Sarah and David, who lived for decades with a father who couldn't tell them where he came from or who he really was. This center isn't about celebrating me," Michael continued. "It's about celebrating the idea that doing the right thing matters, that one person, even someone young with no power, can make a difference. That courage is contagious. I look at my children and grandchildren," he said, gesturing to where Martha was holding her great-grandson, Sarah's 3-month-old son named Arthur. "I look at them, and I think about the world I want them to grow up in, a world where corruption doesn't win, where people stand up when they see something wrong, where courage is more common than silence. This house once represented my greatest sacrifice. Now it represents my greatest hope, that my story will inspire others to be brave when they need to be, to stand up even when it's hard, to believe that justice is possible." Thank you to everyone who made this possible. Thank you to my family for your patience and love. And thank you to every person who will walk through these doors and choose courage." The applause was long and genuine. After the ceremony, people lined up to meet Michael, to thank him, to tell him how his story had inspired them. One visitor was particularly meaningful, a young woman, probably 20 years old, who approached with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Patterson," she said, "I work as an intern at a state office. 2 weeks ago I discovered financial irregularities in some contracts. I was terrified to report it. I thought I'd lose my job, that no one would believe me, that I'd ruin my career before it started. Then I read about you," she continued, "about what you did at 19, and I thought, if you could do that, if you could risk everything, then I could risk my internship. So I reported it, and they're investigating, and I wanted to thank you for giving me the courage." Michael shook her hand, deeply moved. "You're the one who had courage. You're the one who saw something wrong and spoke up. That's all any of us can do." As the sun began to set, the crowds dispersed. Arthur, Martha, and Michael walked through the house one last time before locking up for the night. "Do you ever regret it?" Martha asked her son as they stood in the bunker. 40 years of your life gone. 40 years we can't get back. Was it worth it?" Michael didn't answer immediately. He looked around the room at the exhibits documenting his investigation, at the visitor's book where people had written messages of thanks and inspiration. "I regret the pain it caused you," he finally said. "I regret the years we lost. But do I regret exposing corruption? Do I regret standing up for what was right? No, I can't regret that." "If you had it to do over," Arthur asked, "knowing what you know now, would you do it again?" Michael smiled. "I'd do it exactly the same. Except I'd make sure you knew I was alive. I'd find a way to get a message to you, even if it was risky. That's the one thing I'd change." "The past is the past," Martha said gently. "What matters is now. And now we have our son back. We have grandchildren. We have great-grandchildren. We have this center that will inspire people for generations. That's not nothing. That's everything," Michael agreed. They climbed the stairs out of the bunker, turned off the lights, and locked the door. As they walked to their cars, Arthur put his arm around Martha. "Remember this morning a year ago?" he said. "We drove here planning to destroy this house, to smash it to pieces and haul it away. And instead, we found our son," Martha replied. "We found the truth. We found hope." "I was so angry at this house," Arthur continued. "So angry at the memories, the pain, everything it represented. I wanted it gone. But destroying it wouldn't have healed us," Martha said. "Only the truth could do that. Only knowing what really happened, only getting Michael back." Michael walked with them to their car, still unwilling to say goodbye after just getting them back. "When will I see you again?" he asked. "Tomorrow," Martha said firmly. "And the day after that. And every day we can. We've lost 40 years. We're not losing another minute." "Jennifer wants to host a family dinner this weekend," Michael said. "Everyone together. You, me, Jennifer, Sarah, David, little Arthur. All of us. We'll be there," Arthur promised. As they drove away, leaving the Michael Patterson Civic Courage Center behind them, Arthur and Martha held hands in the comfortable silence of a couple who'd weathered unimaginable pain and emerged intact. "You know what I realized?" Martha said. "We came here to bury the past. But you can't bury the past. You can only understand it and learn from it. And use it to build something better," Arthur added. "That house was going to be rubble in a dumpster. Now it's a place that teaches courage. Our pain was going to consume us," Martha said. "Now it's become a source of hope for others." They drove in silence for a few more miles, then Martha spoke again. "I forgive him, you know, for not contacting us, for letting us suffer. He was trying to keep us safe. He was trying to do what was right." "I forgave him the moment I saw him," Arthur replied. "The moment I realized he was alive, everything else became irrelevant. He's alive. That's what matters." "Do you think we would have found the bunker if we hadn't come to demolish the house?" Martha wondered. "No," Arthur said certainly. "We'd avoided this place for 40 years. If we hadn't finally decided to tear it down, we never would have discovered the truth, never would have gotten Michael back. So maybe," Martha said thoughtfully, "we needed to hit rock bottom. We needed to be so desperate to forget the past that we were willing to destroy it. and that desperation led us to the truth. Sometimes, Arthur agreed, you have to be willing to destroy something before you can discover what's really there. We were so focused on the pain the house represented, we never looked deeper. And if we'd looked deeper 40 years ago? Martha asked. We might have found the bunker, Arthur acknowledged. But Michael wouldn't have been ready to come home. The criminals weren't arrested yet. We would have found an empty room and never known what it meant. Timing, Martha said. Everything happened exactly when it needed to happen. They pulled into the driveway of their apartment complex, the modest home they'd lived in since leaving the farmhouse in 1988. Are we going to move? Martha asked. Now that we have the compensation money, we could get a bigger place. Do we need a bigger place? Arthur countered. Martha thought about it. No, we need family. We need Michael and his family in our lives. We need to make up for lost time. Where we live doesn't matter. Agreed, Arthur said. Let's use the money for the grandchildren's education, for making sure Sarah and David and little Arthur have opportunities. That's what Michael would have wanted us to do with it anyway. They got out of the car and walked to their apartment, arms around each other, carrying the weight of 40 years that somehow felt lighter now. Inside, Martha made tea while Arthur turned on the news. The grand opening of the Michael Patterson Civic Courage Center was the lead story. Look at that, Arthur said as images of the center filled the screen. Our son is famous. Our son is a hero, Martha corrected. He always was. We just didn't know it. Do you think he'll be okay? Arthur asked. With all this publicity, with everyone knowing his story, he's been in hiding for 40 years. He's been waiting for 40 years, Martha replied. Waiting to tell the truth. Waiting to be himself again. I think he'll be more than okay. I think he'll finally be free. They sat together on their couch, drinking tea, watching the news coverage of the center that had risen from the ruins of their pain. You know what I keep thinking? Martha said. This morning a year ago I woke up thinking today was the day I'd finally let go of Michael. The day I'd destroy the last physical reminder of him and try to move on. And instead, Arthur finished, it was the day you got him back. Life is strange, Martha said. The thing I wanted to destroy most was the thing that saved me. Not the thing, Arthur corrected gently. Our son. Michael saved us by being brave enough to hide, brave enough to investigate, brave enough to sacrifice everything for what was right. The house was just the tool. The house, Martha agreed, and the bunker underneath it, and Andrew Reeves who built the escape route, and Agent Morrison who protected Michael, and 40 years of time that had to pass before everyone was safe. All of it necessary, Arthur said. Every piece of pain, every year of waiting, every moment of grief, it all led to this, to Michael being free, to our family being whole again. Martha leaned her head on Arthur's shoulder. I'm tired of being angry at the past. Then let's not be, Arthur suggested. Let's be grateful instead. Grateful that Michael is alive. Grateful that he's safe. Grateful that we have a future together after thinking we never would. Grateful, Martha repeated, testing the word. Yes, I can do that. They finished their tea and prepared for bed, a routine they'd followed for 50 years of marriage. But tonight felt different. Tonight, for the first time in 40 years, they went to sleep without the weight of not knowing. They knew the truth. They had their son back, and tomorrow they'd see him again. Everything they'd wanted to destroy had led them to everything they'd hoped to find. Sometimes the houses we want to demolish are the ones holding the keys to our freedom. Sometimes the past we try to bury is the only thing that can set us free. And sometimes the courage to face what we've lost is exactly what we need to discover what we never knew we had. Arthur and Martha had learned all of this in a bunker beneath a house they'd tried to destroy, and they would never forget it. If this story moved you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We share powerful true stories about family, courage, and the strength of the human spirit every week. Drop a comment below. Have you ever wanted to destroy something from your past, only to discover it held the answers you were seeking? What gave you the courage to face it? Your story might inspire someone else who's struggling. Arthur and Martha's journey teaches us profound lessons about grief, truth, and healing. They spent 40 years running from their pain, avoiding the house that represented their greatest loss, trying desperately to forget. When they finally decided to destroy that house, to reduce it to rubble and make it disappear forever, they discovered the truth they'd been seeking for decades. Their son wasn't dead. He was alive, and he'd been a hero they never knew about. But here's the deeper truth. If they hadn't been willing to face that house, if they hadn't been desperate enough to confront their pain head-on, they never would have found the bunker. They never would have discovered Michael's investigation. They never would have learned he was alive. Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom before we can find solid ground. Sometimes we need to be willing to destroy something before we can discover what it's really made of. Sometimes our greatest pain is hiding our greatest hope. Michael Patterson was 19 years old when he discovered corruption and chose to fight it instead of ignoring it. He sacrificed his identity, his family, his entire life to stand up for what was right. That kind of courage changes the world. But Arthur and Martha showed courage too. The courage to keep living after losing their son. The courage to finally face the place they'd been avoiding. The courage to destroy what hurt them most, and in doing so find what they'd lost. The Michael Patterson Civic Courage Center now teaches thousands of people every year that one person can make a difference. That corruption can be defeated. That sacrifice for a greater good is never wasted. But it also teaches something else, that facing your past, no matter how painful, is the only way to truly move forward. That the things we want to destroy often hold the keys to our healing. That truth, no matter how long buried, eventually finds its way to light. Michael spent 40 years in hiding, unable to go home, separated from everyone he loved. But his courage saved countless people from ongoing corruption and inspired generations to stand up for what's right. Arthur and Martha spent 40 years in grief, believing they'd lost their son forever. But their willingness to finally confront that grief led them to a reunion they thought was impossible, and together, their family turned tragedy into triumph, pain into purpose, and a house that represented loss into a center that celebrates courage. Sometimes the past you're trying to destroy is the foundation of your future. Sometimes the thing that hurt you most is the thing that will heal you. And sometimes the courage to face what you've lost is exactly what you need to find what you've been seeking all along. Thank you for watching. Share this story with someone who needs hope. And remember, it's never too late for truth, it's never too late for healing, and it's never too late to come home. We'll see you in the next story.